Imagine planting a tree with all the love in the world. You nurture it, water it, protect it from the wind and the storm. But one day, when that tree grows strong, its branches strike you and its roots seem to pull away from you. How is it possible that something you nurtured with so much sacrifice now ignores you, belittles you, or even makes you feel worthless? The truth is harsh, but it must be faced. A child who doesn't respect their mother didn't become that way overnight. Something happened along the way. Something you allowed without realizing it. Something life taught them without you knowing. Something that, if you don't understand today, will continue to hurt. In this video, we're going to unearth the root of this problem, not to blame you, but to give you clarity and, above all, tools to reclaim your dignity. From why giving too much can lead you to receive less, to the final key, the hardest one, but also the most freeing. How to stop expecting what may never come and start living for yourself. I'm Gabriel, and what you're about to hear could completely change the way you understand your relationship with your child. But for that, you need to stay until the end. Let's begin. If a child doesn't respect their mother, is it the mother's fault, the child's, or life itself? The easiest answer is to blame youth, society, or the natural ingratitude of human beings. But comfort doesn't lead to truth. The truth is that respect is not an automatic right. It's either cultivated or lost, and although it's painful to admit, it's often lost without us even noticing, in small gestures, in silences where boundaries should have been, in sacrifices made out of love that ended up being the first step toward indifference. We are not born knowing how to raise a child. Motherhood is a battlefield where every decision has consequences that only become clear with the passing of years. And one day, when you expect the gratitude and respect you thought you planted, you find yourself facing a child who no longer listens to you, who treats you with distance, who speaks to you impatiently, or worse, who ignores you as if you were just another piece of furniture in the house. Then comes the inevitable question: when was the respect lost? Imagine an old house that was once strong and beautiful. Over the years, without anyone noticing, the roof starts to leak, the wood weakens, and cracks appear in the walls. At first, they are barely visible lines, almost imperceptible. But one day, without warning, the entire structure trembles and collapses. Respect is the same. It doesn't disappear in an instant, but through a silent process that only becomes obvious when it seems too late. Maybe it was when you let that first sign of disrespect pass, hoping it was just a momentary mistake. Or when you gave in repeatedly to their demands without asking for anything in return. Maybe it was when the fear of losing their love made you tolerate words or attitudes that you would never have allowed before. Marcus Aurelius said that we must live according to the nature of things, not the idea we wish to have of them. And the nature of respect is simple. It cannot be demanded. It is earned through firm boundaries, by example, by the dignity of someone who doesn't beg for recognition, but inspires it through their very presence. The problem is that many mothers have grown up with the belief that love must be unconditional to the point of absolute sacrifice, as if being a mother meant erasing one's own existence to give everything. But respect doesn't come from excessive sacrifice. It comes from the balance between giving and valuing oneself. Today I ask you, how many times have you allowed yourself to be spoken to with disdain without responding? How many times have you felt treated as if your time had no value? How many times have you swallowed your tears in silence, thinking it's better to keep quiet to avoid pushing your child even further away? If you think giving in and waiting is the solution, you're wrong. Respect that's lost cannot be regained with patience, but with clarity and courage. And the first step is recognizing that the house has been crumbling, but you can still reinforce the foundations. Life has given you years of wisdom, experience, and strength. Don't let fear of loneliness or guilt stop you from claiming what is rightfully yours. Because this isn't about your child respecting you just because they should, but about you remembering that you deserve that respect. And when you do, when you dare to change the dynamic, you'll be surprised to see how even the most twisted tree can start to straighten its branches. If respect is lost when you let too many things slide, the next mistake is even harder to recognize because on the surface, it comes from love. But let's not fool ourselves. When you give too much, you end up receiving less. It sounds unfair, even contradictory, but it's a reality many mothers face without knowing how to break the cycle. Think of a fountain that never stops flowing. At first, those around it approach with gratitude, drinking from it with respect, thankful for its generosity. But over time, routine turns that act into something taken for granted. No one stops to admire it or appreciate its presence anymore. It's become part of the landscape, and what was once a gift is now a silent obligation, an invisible presence only noticed when, one day, the water stops flowing. This is what happens to many mothers who have given and given endlessly, believing that unconditional love must mean absolute selflessness, expecting nothing in return. But when everything is given without limits, what you eventually receive is indifference. The problem is that women of your generation were taught that a mother who thinks of herself is selfish, that a good mother always puts her children first, that her happiness depends on theirs. But what happens when those children grow up and don't return that love with the same care? What happens when life goes on and suddenly you realize you've spent decades making sure they have the best, while forgetting that you also deserve more than the role of endless giver? Seneca said, "He who gives without measure receives not gratitude, but demands." And that's the truth. When you teach someone to receive without effort, without reciprocity, without conditions, you stop being seen as someone worthy of recognition and become part of their emotional furniture. Not because you wanted it that way, but because that's human nature. What comes easily becomes invisible. What is constant stops being valued. What's guaranteed becomes an assumed right. And so, what began as an act of pure love turns into a weakness, a rope your child learns to pull whenever they need something, but forgets when it's no longer useful. How many times have you said yes when you wanted to say no? How many times have you prioritized their well-being over your own, even when you knew it wasn't fair? Maybe you believed that over time, all that effort would translate into respect and gratitude. But now you see the reality. Instead of love, you receive indifference. Instead of recognition, you receive demands. Instead of companionship, you receive fleeting visits filled with haste and empty conversations. This is where the most difficult Stoic lesson comes in. You can't control how others see you, but you can control how you give of yourself. It's not about stopping your love for your child or closing the door, but about restoring balance. Understanding that healthy love isn't giving until you're exhausted. It's giving consciously, with dignity, with the understanding that you matter too. Think about this. If one day you were no longer available, if you set clear boundaries, if you made your well-being a priority, how would the dynamic with your child change? At first, there might be surprise, even frustration, because no one easily adjusts to losing what they took for granted. But over time, that change would spark something in them, the awareness that their mother is not an endless source, but a human being with needs, desires, and a life of her own. The question is, do you dare to do it? Do you dare to stop giving to the point of losing yourself? Do you dare to show that your love is valuable, but also worthy of respect? Because the only way to change the story is to stop writing it with the same old ink. And if you keep waiting for respect and gratitude to come on their own, you'll be waiting your entire life. The problem with giving too much doesn't end with the other person's indifference. There's something more dangerous, something that slowly takes root in a mother's mind until it becomes an invisible but devastating burden. Guilt. We've reached the third point of this video, and this is where things start to change, because guilt doesn't just make you vulnerable. It keeps you trapped in a cycle of sacrifice and frustration that never breaks. Since you became a mother, guilt has been with you in one way or another. Guilt for not having done more, for not being perfect, for making decisions you might question today. But there's something you need to understand. Guilt, when it's not productive, becomes a tool of manipulation. It doesn't matter if you're the one feeding it or if your child is unconsciously using it to keep you in the role of eternal emotional provider. The truth is, if you live constantly apologizing for what you did or didn't do, you will always be at a disadvantage. The mind of a mother who feels guilty is fertile ground for ingratitude. Because someone who feels indebted doesn't set boundaries, doesn't demand respect, doesn't give herself the value she deserves. And this is where many children learn, even if they never say it out loud, that they can push those boundaries without consequences. Phrases like, "You were never there enough," or "You made bad decisions," become emotional daggers that make you retreat, doubt yourself, and keep giving, keep yielding, keep waiting for everything to balance out one day. But that day never comes because guilt doesn't fix the past or build respect in the present. Stoicism teaches us that we can't change what has already happened. We can only decide how we face it now. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one." And the same applies here. Instead of exhausting yourself, justifying your mistakes, or waiting for someone else to validate your effort, start acting from the conviction that you did what you could with the tools you had at the time. You can't turn back time and rewrite history, but you can change how you allow yourself to be treated today. If you feel that guilt has weakened you, there's something you can do starting now. Every time your child or your own mind tries to remind you of what you didn't do right, respond with a single question. What now? Not what if, not what should I have done, but what do I do with this now? The answer will be clear. Stop waiting for validation, stop apologizing for every decision, and start moving forward with the certainty that you don't need to keep paying for mistakes that only life itself could have taught you. Now I want you to tell me in the comments where you're watching from and write the phrase, "I owe nothing to the past." Because at this point in the video, you already know that guilt can no longer rule your life. And there are still deeper lessons to come, including the final one, which will be the hardest, but also the most liberating. Subscribe if you haven't already and stay with me, because what's coming next could change the way you see your relationship with your child forever. Guilt can weaken you, but there's something even more dangerous hiding behind it: the fear of loneliness. We've reached the fourth point of this video, and it's time to talk about a truth many people avoid facing. The fear of loneliness has made you tolerate too much. It's that silent fear that has led you to accept disrespect, justify absences, and stay in a place where you are no longer seen or valued. Because if you're not the mother who's always available, then who are you? If one day you decide to set boundaries, what if your child simply pulls away even more? These are the questions that plague the minds of many mothers and keep them trapped in unbalanced relationships where respect is pushed to the background just to avoid being left alone. But stop for a moment and think, is it really companionship you have, or just the illusion of it? What does it mean to be accompanied if deep down you feel ignored, used, emotionally reduced to a secondary role? Because the worst loneliness isn't when you're physically alone. It's when you're surrounded by people who don't value you. And here lies the most dangerous trap. When the fear of losing contact with your child becomes stronger than the desire to be treated with dignity, you start negotiating away your own worth. You stay silent when you should speak. You accept disrespect you would never tolerate from anyone else. You settle for crumbs of affection because at least they're still in my life. But what's the point of being in someone's life if you're nothing more than a name on their list? An option they only reach out to when they need something. Stoicism teaches us that the greatest mistake is to emotionally depend on what we cannot control. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." And it's that interpretation you need to challenge today. Because the fear of loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from the belief that without certain connections, your life loses meaning. But the truth is different. It's not about being surrounded by people at any cost, but about having relationships that add value, that respect you, that make you feel alive. Look at your life honestly. Ask yourself if you've allowed the fear of loneliness to dictate your decisions. If you've held on to relationships that only drain you simply because you're terrified of being without them. And then imagine what would happen if you let go of that fear. If instead of clinging to relationships that don't serve you, you began to invest in your own life, in new friendships, in activities that fill you with purpose, in yourself. True strength isn't about continuing to accept the unacceptable out of fear of being alone. It's about learning to enjoy your own company, knowing that you are valuable for who you are, not just for the role you play in other people's lives. You are not here to live in anyone's shadow. You are not here to beg for attention or sacrifice your dignity in exchange for a few obligatory visits. Life still has so much to offer you, but only if you dare to stop begging for what you deserve by right. Because respect, gratitude, and true love aren't begged for on your knees. They are inspired by the strength of someone who knows that even in solitude, they remain whole. If the fear of loneliness has made you tolerate too much, the next thing you need to understand is even deeper. We've reached the 5th point of this video, and it's time to face it head on. A child who doesn't respect their mother doesn't respect themselves either. This isn't an excuse for their behavior, but it is a truth that explains why so many parent-child relationships deteriorate over time. A child who scorns, ignores, or belittles the woman who gave them life is not someone at peace with themselves. They are someone carrying wounds, resentments, or poorly managed selfishness. But here's the key point. Their inner chaos should not become your cross to bear. Many mothers remain trapped in the idea that they must rescue their children from their own character. They tell themselves that if their child is cold, ungrateful, or disrespectful, it's because something is missing, because they have problems, because their life is difficult. And while that may be true, there's another truth. Respect is not optional. It doesn't depend on mood, financial situations, or circumstances. If an adult child chooses to treat you with indifference or disdain, that is their choice, not their fate. And continuing to tolerate it, justify it, or wait for them to one day wake up with gratitude only sinks you deeper into a relationship where you always lose. The problem with accepting this lack of respect is that over time, it starts to feel normal. What once hurt over the years becomes routine. You stop expecting calls, you stop expecting to be treated with dignity, you stop expecting an apology, and without realizing it, you start believing the most dangerous lie of all, the idea that you deserve nothing more than that. But this is where you must stop and ask yourself a fundamental question. What kind of example do you want to be? Because if you allow yourself to be treated with indifference, if you keep giving without receiving anything in return, you are teaching your child that they can treat others the same way. And even worse, You are teaching future generations that a mother's love is something that can be taken for granted, something that doesn't need to be reciprocated. This isn't about demanding love or begging for recognition. It's about acting with the dignity of someone who knows they deserve to be treated with respect, not for what they've given, but for who they are. Epictetus said that the only things we truly own are our own character and our decisions. And that means that while you can't force your child to change, you can decide how to respond to their behavior. You can keep waiting for them to realize the value of their mother on their own, or you can take the hardest but most liberating step. Stop asking for what doesn't come, reclaim your space, and show that your love is strong, but it's not a doormat anyone can step on without consequences. If a child doesn't respect themselves, their path is their responsibility. It's not your job to carry their arrogance or their lack of empathy. Your job is to take care of your own life, your own peace, the tranquility you can still build. And if that means taking a step back, setting boundaries, or even accepting that there's nothing more you can do, then so be it. Because at the end of the day, respect is not begged for, it's inspired. And to inspire it, you first have to start respecting yourself. If you keep waiting for your child to change on their own, you could spend the rest of your life stuck in that endless waiting. And during that time, what happens to you? We've reached the 6th point of this video, and here's something you need to understand once and for all. Gratitude cannot be demanded, but it can be taught. And if your child hasn't learned to appreciate what you did for them, it's because there was never a real consequence for not doing so. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine 10 years have passed. You're sitting in the same chair, in the same house, with the same thoughts. Your child is still the same, distant, cold, speaking to you in a way that makes you feel more like a burden than a mother. And you're still there, waiting for them to finally understand, to have a revelation, to come back to you with remorse and loving words. But that day never comes. Because the truth is, people don't change by magic. They change out of necessity, through crisis, through the absence of what they took for granted. And if you never dare to move from your place, if you keep making yourself available no matter what, if you continue following the same script as always, then what reason does your child have to change their role in the story? This is not about becoming cruel or distancing yourself out of resentment. It's about making them see through actions and not please that their attitude comes at a price. Because people learn to value what they lose, not what's always there. If you never drew the line, if you never said, enough, if you never had the strength to make your life a priority, then don't expect them to do it for you. Think about anyone who has experienced a great loss in life, a parent, a friend, a partner. When did they value them the most? It wasn't when they were present and available. It was when they were gone. When there was no one left to listen, when there were no more second chances. The truth is this, many people don't understand the weight of love until they lose it. And even though the idea of distancing yourself or setting boundaries may feel painful, sometimes it's the only way to make them aware. But here's the big question. Do you have the courage to do it? Because to reclaim your dignity, you first have to learn to tolerate the silence, to endure the emptiness that change leaves behind, the discomfort of doing what you've never done before. Most mothers never reach this point because fear holds them back, because they prefer the routine of an unbalanced relationship over the uncertainty of taking a different step. But that fear is only temporary. The regret of doing nothing, however, lasts a lifetime. Gratitude cannot be begged for. It's cultivated through absence, through example, through the firmness of someone who shows that love doesn't mean enduring everything. The great Stoic lesson here is that you cannot force anyone to value what they have, but you can decide how much longer you will keep giving away your peace for nothing. And that decision, in the end, is yours alone. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you knows you can't keep living the same way. You've seen how a lack of boundaries has eroded respect, how the fear of loneliness has made you accept the unacceptable, how guilt has been your worst enemy, and how gratitude cannot be demanded. It can only be awakened through actions. Now we've reached the seventh and final point of this video, and it's the hardest of all because it requires something very few people have the courage to do, to stop waiting for something that may never come and reclaim yourself. How many more years will you keep sitting in that chair, waiting for a change that never arrives? How many more times will you excuse your child's indifference by telling yourself, they're busy, that's just modern life, or maybe with time they'll understand? How many more mornings will you wake up with the feeling that something is missing, something isn't right, something broke that you don't know if you'll ever be able to fix? The hard truth no one wants to hear is that not all children change, not all of them mature, not all of them wake up in time. And if you keep basing your peace on the hope that one day your child will open their eyes and come to you with the love you deserve, chances are you'll end your life trapped in that endless waiting. It's time to make peace with the possibility that the recognition may never come. It's time to stop tying your happiness to someone else's attitude. It's time to understand that your life goes on, that you can still do so much for yourself, that you are not only a mother, that you are not just a presence in the shadow of someone else's life. Because the biggest mistake many mothers make is believing that if they stop waiting, they are giving up. That's not true. This isn't about giving up. It's about letting go of the weight you've been carrying. To stop waiting doesn't mean to stop loving. It means to stop depending. It doesn't mean closing the door forever. It means no longer pounding on it, hoping someone will open it. Ask yourself this honestly: if you knew for certain that your child would never change, that they would always be just as distant, just as cold, just as absent, what would you do with your life? How would you fill your days? Where would you put your energy? What would you do for yourself? Because that's the key. That's the only answer that truly matters. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. If you keep focusing on lack, on absence, on what you're not receiving, you are condemning yourself to a life of frustration. But if you make the conscious decision to focus on what you do have, on what you can still do, on the relationships that do nurture you, then you will have taken the most important step. You will have chosen to live instead of waiting. And when you do that, when you stop placing your worth in someone else's hands, you will realize something surprising. The respect you were searching for will start to come, but not because you asked for it, because you embodied it. Because when a person stops begging, when they become whole within themselves, when they learn to enjoy their own company and demand what they deserve, the world notices. And in that moment, perhaps your child will notice too. But by then, it won't matter as much, because you will have understood that because you will. The respect you were searching for will start to come, but not because you asked for it, because you embodied it. Because when a person stops begging, when they become whole within themselves, when they learn to enjoy their own company and demand what they deserve, the world notices. And in that moment, perhaps your child will notice too. But by then, it won't matter as much, because you will have understood that the only person who truly needed to value you was yourself. If you've understood that the only person who truly needed to value you was yourself, then it's time to take the next step. We've reached the 8th point of this video, and this is where theory turns into action. Respect begins when you dare to set boundaries, not when you ask to be treated well, not when you wait for others to change, not when you try to be more patient. Respect comes when you show, through actions and not words, that your dignity is not for sale. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you love wisely. It's the difference between a mother who is present by choice and a mother who is available out of obligation. It's understanding that you don't have to answer every call, that you don't have to be available all the time, that you don't have to keep giving when all you receive is indifference. It's knowing how to say no without guilt, without fear, and without unnecessary explanations. It's accepting that if your child gets upset because you're no longer solving everything for them, that's their problem, not yours. Now tell me, when was the last time you said no without feeling bad about it? When was the last time you refused a request simply because you didn't want to do it, without explanations, without fear of what they might think? Because that's the exercise I want you to start practicing from today. The next time your child acts as if your time, your help, or your effort is an acquired right, stop and ask yourself, do I really want to do this? Are they treating me with the respect I deserve? If the answer is no, then simply don't do it. No anger, no drama, no guilt. Just say, I can't, or I don't want to. And watch what happens. At first, you'll feel uncomfortable. Maybe your child will get upset. Maybe they'll try to manipulate you with guilt or hurtful words. But what happens afterward isn't what matters. What matters is what happens inside of you when you realize the world doesn't end because you set a boundary, that you're still standing, that you're still you, that you don't need to beg for love or approval. And when you experience that feeling of inner strength, when you see that nothing terrible happens when you defend your space, then you will have taken the hardest step. You will have started to respect yourself. Stoicism teaches us that the key to a fulfilling life isn't in controlling others, but in controlling our own decisions. And your decision now is simple. Keep waiting for others to change or change yourself first. If you don't set boundaries today, tomorrow will be the same. And if tomorrow is the same, your entire life will follow the same pattern until your last day. The question is, are you going to keep allowing yourself to be treated as a secondary option, as someone who is only sought out when it's convenient? Or are you going to start paving your own path with the dignity of someone who knows their worth? Because at this stage of your life, you no longer have time to wait. Either you take the reins now, or you continue being a shadow in someone else's life. And in the end, that's your only choice. If you've made it this far, you already know you can't keep waiting for respect from someone who never learned how to give it. You've understood that change only happens when you decide to set boundaries, let go of guilt, and stop depending emotionally on your child's validation. But there's something else you need to grasp before closing this chapter. Respect begins when you dare to set boundaries. And if you haven't done that yet, it's because something inside you still believes it's easier to keep enduring than to face the consequences of real change. Excuses come disguised as prudence. I don't want to fight. I don't want them to think I'm a bad mother. It's better to leave things as they are. But the truth is, all of that is fear. Fear of the discomfort of saying enough, fear of the other person's reaction, fear of not knowing who you are if you stop being the one who always gives in. Because setting boundaries doesn't just change how others treat you, it also changes how you see yourself. And that's terrifying, because it means you can no longer blame your child, fate, or society. It means that now everything depends on you. But here's the problem. If you keep putting off that moment, if you keep thinking a better time will come, then it never will. There's no perfect day to start saying no, no sign from the heavens telling you it's time to stand up to those who have disrespected you. The only thing that exists is the moment you decide you can't keep living this way. And if that moment isn't now, then when? Look at it this way. Every day you go without setting boundaries is another day you teach your child that it's okay to treat you the way they do. It's not their fault. It's the dynamic you've allowed. but that also means you can change it. If today, right now, you decide you will no longer accept disrespect, no longer justify neglect, no longer be available only when it suits them, then something will break in the structure that has held up that unbalanced relationship. There will be resistance, of course, but there will also be an opportunity. The opportunity for them, for the first time in their life, to face the consequences of their actions. And that's the only way they can learn. Don't expect immediate understanding. Don't expect them to embrace your change with a smile and a hug. Don't expect gratitude for deciding to respect yourself. What you should expect is discomfort, pushback, even anger. Because when someone who has always had control over another feels that control's slipping away, their reaction is to try to get it back. But if you remain firm, if you don't give in, if you prove with actions that you are no longer the same, then something will change over time. Maybe they will start seeing you differently. Maybe they will understand that their mother is not an endless resource, but a person with dignity. And maybe, just maybe, they will begin to truly respect you. But even if they don't, even if they decide to distance themselves further, what truly matters is that you will have reclaimed your life. Because the respect you need most is not your child's, it's your own. And if you don't give it to yourself first, no one else ever will. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't a comfortable conversation, but it's a necessary one. Because living while waiting for respect from someone who never learned to give it is a prison, and the only way to free yourself is by making a decision no one else can make for you. It doesn't matter how many times you've been told that a mother must endure everything, that love is unconditional sacrifice, that it's better to give in than risk losing the relationship. Those are chains disguised as advice, and every day you stay bound to them is another day you give away to a relationship where you're neither seen nor valued. Now you understand, respect is not begged for. It's earned with the dignity of someone who knows their worth, and the only person who can start that change is you. Not everyone is ready to hear this. Some people prefer to keep waiting, convinced that someday everything will change without them having to do anything different. But you've made it to the end, and that means deep down, you know you can't keep living this way. You know you can't keep justifying, waiting, enduring. You know your life cannot be reduced to what someone else decides to give you. And if you truly understand that, I want you to let me know. Write in the comments the phrase, "My respect is not negotiable," and tell me where you're watching from. Because this community is not made of people looking for easy comfort, but of those willing to face the truth and do something about it. I'm Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. I'm here to remind you that Stoicism is not just a philosophy, it's a way of living with strength, with clarity, without illusions or self-deception. It's the discipline of taking control of what you can change and letting go of what is no longer in your hands. Subscribe if you haven't already and join those who have chosen to wake up. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today, because there are many people trapped in waiting for a respect that never comes. And maybe these words are the wake-up call they need. Don't let this conversation end here. There's so much more to understand, to learn, and to apply in your life. Watch one of the videos on the screen and continue this path of strength and transformation. Because in the end, the only person who can decide how to live the rest of your life is you.